Nancy Pelosi's ridiculous impeachment witch hunt is unquestionably making the world a more dangerous place. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the House. They want to impeach President Donald Trump and what impact this is having upon the president's ability to conduct foreign relations. I argue in my piece that this is making the world a more dangerous place, that this is actually harming foreign affairs as world leaders have to question whether or not President Trump is going to be around to implement the agreements that he's entering into. And if he's being weakened domestically, if they should listen to the United States on world affairs when we say we're doing sanctions, or if we're going to warn a country not to do something, are they going to listen to us, or are they going to listen to us less because of this impeachment nonsense? And I argue that the impeachment inquiry into President Trump is almost certain to fail. It was, and we knew that from the moment the president released the transcript of his conversation with the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, and everyone could see basically that there's no there. I don't see any Republicans saying that there's some major violation of law, and I don't see Republicans in good polls actually breaking ranks with the president. The president has a very strong approval rating with Republicans, and if you're going to do impeachment where you need 2/3 of the Senate to convict, it has to be a bipartisan affair. It's supposed to be for high crimes, misdemeanors, bribery, or treason, and we have none of the above here. And for that reason alone, Republicans are not going to vote to convict President Trump. So he's going to stand for re-election in 2020. So why is Nancy Pelosi wasting the nation's time with something that's certain to fail? And in the meantime, it's harming, I believe, foreign relations. Since she announced her impeachment inquiry on September 24th, Hong Kong for the first time shot live rounds into shot one of the Hong Kong protesters with bullets during the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, and that was despite U.S. warnings. Trump was warning here in August against any type of Tiananmen Square crackdown, and he's talking about the trade negotiations with China back in August, saying, I think it'd be very hard to deal if they do violence. I mean, if it's another Tiananmen Square. And then, she does her impeachment inquiry, Pelosi, and then suddenly the police are shooting at the Hong Kong protesters. I believe that the person who was shot was hit in the shoulder, and I think it turned out they were in stable condition, thank God. It hasn't really come to full-scale bloodshed in Hong Kong just yet, but I think that the odds of that go up because why are they going to listen to the United States if Trump's just going to be impeached? On October 2nd, North Korea launched a submarine-capable missile fired from the sea. North Korea, this is from BBC, North Korea has confirmed it test-fired a new type of ballistic missile, a significant escalation from the short-range tests it had conducted since May. The missile capable of carrying a nuclear weapon was the North's 11th tests this year, but this one, fired from a platform at sea, was capable of being launched from a submarine. So Nancy Pelosi, she does her impeachment inquiry, and then North Korea is shooting lobbing missiles off the coast of Japan. On October 9th, Syria invaded, Turkey invaded northern Syria despite the threat of sanctions from the United States. Here was President Trump on October 7 saying, quote, as I've stated before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done it before. They must, with Europe and others, watch over the captured ISIS fighters and families. The U.S. has done far more than anyone could have expected, including the capture of 100% of the ISIS caliphate. It is time now for others in the region, some with great wealth, to protect their own territory. The USA is great. So then the Turkey's going into Syria despite the threat of sanctions. So they clearly weren't listening. And I say this is cause meeting effect. The impeachment inquiry is having a direct bearing upon foreign relations, and it's making the world more dangerous. Now, but if anyone can navigate these challenges, I think it's President Trump. He seems to have an uncanny ability to weather any storm, but adversaries abroad are probably weighing the possibility of Trump being weakened domestically by the House's quest to remove him. Now, on October 5th, U.S. negotiators spoke of good discussions with their North Korean counterparts as nuclear disarmament talks resumed for the first time since February, and they were looking forward to more talks. But days later, North Korea said that its patience was running out. And that's really a shame. And I think that maybe they more likely to come to the table if the United States doesn't have this whole nonsense going on with this impeachment or the Russiagate phony baloney allegations that the president was some sort of Russian agent, and the special counsel probe that lasted 2 years. A year before that, the Justice Department and intelligence agencies were leveling these erroneous allegations that the president was some sort of Russian agent. This was seeded by a DNC and Hillary Clinton paid for dossier of information from Fusion GPS and former British spy Christopher Steele. And he was leveling all these allegations that the Trump campaign was involved with the DNC hack and putting the emails on WikiLeaks. This led to the Carter Page FISA warrant application that gave the Justice Department access to Trump campaign emails, text messages, phone calls, and other documents of Carter Page's contacts in the campaign and the contacts of contacts. And this was surveillance. This was spying on the opposition party in an election year by the Obama administration, only to find out 3 years later that the allegations were fake, that there was no conspiracy between President Trump or his campaign, any member of his campaign, not Paul Manafort, not Carter Page, not Michael Cohen, who is said by Steele to have gone to Prague. And then Mueller says, no, he never went to Prague to meet with Russian agents. That never happened. Any of these contacts, Stone, Roger Stone, and none of these people, George Papadopoulos, were ever convicted of any crime of conspiracy with Russia to hack the DNC or John Podesta emails and put them on WikiLeaks, meaning that the core allegations that led to the FISA application were false and erroneous. And I think that if that hadn't been going on, things might be a lot differently overseas. I mean, maybe these North Korean negotiations would be a little bit more successful. And so these provocations are continuing. On October 7, Trump warned China on Hong Kong, again, telling reporters, quote, if anything happened bad, I think it would be very bad for the negotiation. And I think they have to do that in a peaceful manner. Here, President Trump is again trying to level pressure on China, on Hong Kong. Now, a few days later, Trump on October 11th had a verbal trade agreement with Beijing in hand, even as the threat to the protesters by police and Chinese military remains quite real. But many analysts are questioning whether China will keep its side of the bargain on agricultural purchases to stop currency manipulation and stop intellectual property theft. The jury's out. Is China going to implement this trade deal? Will it ever be finalized? A good question. And maybe China's thinking twice about that with this whole impeachment thing. Maybe they're just trying to run out the clock on the Trump presidency, which they think might be ending shortly. On October 14, Trump also readied sanctions on Turkey via an executive order, and they get that going. And then just a few days later, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, and Vice President Mike Pence announced that they had negotiated a ceasefire between Turkey and the Syrian Kurds. That's great news. Here's Pence saying, I'm proud to report, thanks to the president's strong leadership, the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria. And I know all of you here at Ramstein Air Base have been vital to our mission in the region for years, et cetera, et cetera. So here you have Pence and Pompeo, despite everything, despite all of this impeachment nonsense, they're still, and Trump, they're still able to carry on foreign policy, but I think it's more difficult. Trump's critics, situationally ethical as they are, would have had Trump leaving U.S. troops, just like 100 of them, in northern Syria, using them as human shields between the Turkish forces on one side of the border and then the Syrian, Kurdish, and Russian forces who are working together on the other, probably tearing NATO apart, probably having to relocate the U.S. nuclear deterrent out of Turkey at the Israeli air base, and basically surrendering the Black Sea. I mean, if you look at where Turkey's located on a map, you'll see that it's strategically quite important, and that we really shouldn't be, I think, messing around with our nuclear deterrent located where it is. But I mean, it's on the Mediterranean Sea. It's on the Black Sea. And this is situated right in between Europe and the Middle East, and between the Middle East and Russia. That's Ukraine right across the water, and Russia. So it's really, I think, a big problem. It just give you a better view of the area. That this is quite vital to national security interests to be able to have a good relationship with Turkey in NATO. And I think to defend Syria's territory, I don't think you sacrifice NATO to defend Syria. That's not the way these things work. So here, Trump, he's using sanctions, and he's using diplomacy to try to get Turkey to back off a little bit, because it's dangerous in any event. Turkey could be running into Russian forces, and we could have a situation where the NATO alliance is called, potentially into combat. And we don't want to be in Syria, I think, fighting over that. The Islamic State is defeated, and I think that the Syrians are actually saying they're going to protect the Kurds, and they're working together. The Syrians have been arming the Kurds for a few years now, against any Turkish potential incursion. So there's a lot of tripwires there that can get you into a bigger war that I think we would be best to avoid. And that's what the president says he wants to do. And he's the president. He gets to set the foreign policy. This happens to be a policy I do support. And we've been critical at Americans for Limited Government of the U.S. role in Syria since 2013. Obama wanted to go in without congressional authorization, and we supported members of Congress who opposed that. In 2014, when he sent troops in eastern Syria to fight Islamic State, we said, okay, that's fine, but go get congressional authorization, because you shouldn't have troops on the ground under the War Powers Act for longer than a period of time without going to Congress for congressional authorization. They stayed there for 4 years. Trump comes in. We say the same thing. You should really have authorization here. So when Trump announces that he's finally getting out of Syria, my personal reaction is it's about time. But in any event, still some fighting is persisting on the border here. And I think that could have a lot to do with is Turkey really going to listen to the sanctions threat? Are they taking Trump seriously, or as seriously as they would be without this impeachment nonsense going on? From his first days in office, Trump's national security advisor, former national security advisor Michael Flynn, was ambushed by FBI agents with a surprise interrogation over his transition efforts to cool U.S. tensions with Russia back in December 2016. Right before the Trump administration was coming into office, the Obama administration was enacting sanctions against Russia, and then the outgoing administration wanted to ensure that those sanctions wouldn't go anywhere. So when Michael Flynn says to the Russian ambassador during transition, you know what, just hold off on any reaction, we'll deal with this in a few weeks, and just don't overreact. And I think that was a good thing. Mike Flynn's doing his job there, and he's ensuring that we're going to have basically have a relationship going forward into the Trump administration. The world didn't end just because Obama, his administration ended and President Trump, a Republican, won the election. We still carry on U.S. policy, and it may be a different policy under the Trump administration versus the Obama administration. But here we're gonna break everything, every norm to do with U.S. foreign policy, the powers of the presidency under Article 2 to go after Trump, accuse him of being a Russian agent, carry the entire nation through a witch hunt, basically, that turned out to be totally fictitious. None of these guys, not Michael Flynn, not Paul Manafort, not Carter Page, not George Papadopoulos, not Roger Stone, and certainly not President Trump, were ever conspiring with Russia. We know that because of Robert Mueller's special counsel report into Russian interference. He says there was no conspiracy with Russia by the Trump campaign, or any Americans for that matter. Now, in 2019, the president's 2017, the president's conversations with the leaders of Mexico and Australia were leaked to the press. Michael Flynn, his Justice Department lawyers, after they got him fired with this surprise interrogation, threatened him if he didn't submit a guilty plea that they would go after his son for some sort of prosecution. Now, Flynn's plan to do with the Trump foreign policy was going to be he was the one who was kind of pushing Trump to say, you know what, we should seek cooperation with Russia on international terrorism. Michael Flynn, back in 2015, December, he went to Moscow and he went on to Russian television at an event that was publicly televised. I think it was transparent, and he was reportedly briefing the Defense Intelligence Agency on his trip there and a trip back. So I don't think that he was violating any laws by going on this program and stating what he thought about U.S.-Russian relations. and he appreciated the conversation he was having with the journalist. He says this back and forth that I do appreciate it, I respect it, because we have to have this debate. We absolutely have to have this debate, and we have to have it now. We can't, the United States, I'm speaking as a private citizen, the United States can't sit there and go, Russia, you're bad, and Russia can't sit there and say to the U.S., you're bad. What we have to do, like we have done in the past, and I could go into a couple of historical examples where Europe would not be Europe today, that is thriving, had it not been for Russia and the United States working together 75 years ago, and in other places where we have worked together. So this idea of not being able to work together is a misnomer, and I think we have to step back and we have to say, okay, what are the common interests, and then what are the common goals that we want to achieve? And those goals, I believe, the number one goal is to eliminate the cancerous idea that exists inside the Islamic religion. We must do that. Flynn called also on Arab leaders to work with the U.S. and Russia towards that end, adding, quote, the second common goal is to keep some level of stability in the Middle East that creates a new set of economic conditions to deal with these 15 to 35-year-old men that exist. So in Flynn's perspective, the destabilizing proxy wars in the Middle East have done much to foster the very conditions that are favorable to groups like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. And on the U.S. and Russia, he says, quote, stop being like two bullies in a playground. Quit acting immature with each other and know that I have a disagreement with you, you have a disagreement with me. You know, there's a funny marriage between Russia and the United States, but it's a marriage, whether we like it or not. And that marriage is very, very rocky right now. And what we don't need is we don't need this marriage to break up. We've had our breakups in the past, but we need to look at this. I mean, I'm deadly serious about this because I know this enemy, speaking on radical Islam. And I think there's some in this country that know this enemy, having dealt with it in Chechnya and Dagestan and other places. This is a very, very deadly enemy. My wish and hope is that we figure out a way to work strategically together. And I think that's the way ahead. Whether or not we work together 20 years from now, I don't know. But I know if we don't work together right now, the potential for going to a much larger conflict against each other, or the potential for this enemy to do far more damage than they already have, is very, very real. So Michael Flynn, I think he's a patriot. I think he had a different view on U.S. policy and relations towards Russia. President Trump on the campaign trail in 2016 adopted that position. He said in the debates, wouldn't it be great if we could get along better with Russia? Michael Flynn's named National Security Advisor, and so they, FBI, the Justice Department, they ambush Michael Flynn. They go after him. They were trying to decapitate this presidency and to prevent him from carrying out the policy he campaigned on, and that his National Security Advisor was advising him to do. And it's been a catastrophe for this country. It's been a catastrophe for world relations. U.S.-Russian relations are at an all-time low. Since this time, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty has been terminated. In the meantime, both countries have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at one another. According to the Arms Control Association, the United States has 6,185 nuclear weapons. Russia has 6,490. They're all pointed at one another. It's enough to destroy, probably wipe out humanity. And so you have to have a relationship with Russia and other nuclear powers, whether you're friends with them or not, whether you agree with their values or not, because out of strategic necessity, out of these nuclear weapons are an existential threat to humanity. So I surely hope, and I surely hope you hope, that the U.S. and Russia or China or everyone else can get together on nuclear arms control so that they can stay out of the hands of terrorists, or so that we're not launching World War III against one another, which sometimes you get the impression that members of Congress are just itching for. I mean, are they in such a rush to die? Don't they want their children and their children's children to thrive, for humanity to continue? It seems pretty important to me. So I'm glad that President Trump is pursuing his détente style policy, much in the tradition of Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan. I think that that's a wise policy, and it looks at the long view of international relations. And thank goodness he's not in the rush to war. And certainly not in Syria, where these forces could crash into one another. I think there are other examples. If you look at the president's challenges today, he has to deal with China, North Korea, Iran, the Middle East, Ukraine. There's an ongoing civil war there. The U.S. played a role in helping to start back in 2013 and 2014 when the U.S. was backing the overthrow of Ukrainian president. He was pro-Russian, Viktor Yanukovych, and then we put in a pro-Europe European president there, and just to get a European trade deal with the the Ukrainians passed, and then the country split in half. 10,000 people or more are dead. Ukraine and Russia could go to war at any minute, really. This is it's a dangerous situation. It's a dangerous world that we live in. So you need a president who's in full capacity of his powers, and that they're going to take the threat of sanctions or force, if it needs to be, as a last resort from the United States seriously. Right now, world leaders are probably saying, you know what, President Trump doesn't have the support of the Democrats and the Congress. They're trying to impeach him. His own party sometimes seems ambivalent towards President Trump. This is dangerous. In the nuclear era, this could be deadly. And I'll leave you with the close here. President Trump is attempting to bridge divides, bring peace, and improve trade relations abroad with adversaries. And he's being hampered at every turn by his own government. Politics is supposed to end at the water's edge, but in the age of Trump, that clearly is a myth. Or at least it is only true when the Washington, D.C. establishment is running foreign policy. If somebody new comes on the stage, like Trump or somebody else, and tries his own way to mitigate these conflicts that threaten us all, they lose their minds and attempt to sabotage everything. We're talking about the intelligence services, the diplomatic services, the State Department. This Yovanovitch, ambassador to Ukraine, seems to have had a part in this. And I think Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, she really needs to think carefully and twice about the horrible precedent that's being created by her endless witch hunt and the peril that it's really putting humanity in. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.